Morning. I know you're, welcome back, by the way, after break. I know you're accustomed to seeing Professor O'Rourke up here, but he is actually in New York today accepting some awards on behalf of the Communication Center and students for great work that they've done. So I'm filling in for him today. My name is Ed Conlon, and I'm an associate dean in the college, and I'm also the director of the Notre Dame Deloitte Center for Ethical Leadership. This is 10 years hence, and our speaker this morning comes to us from Arlington, Virginia, where she serves as Changemaker Campus Consortium Director for Ashoka, which is a global organization that identifies and invests in leading social entrepreneurs, individuals with innovative and practical ideas for solving social problems. Michele works with faculty, administrators, and students to change complex institutional systems to become more supportive environments for social entrepreneurship and change making. Before joining Ashoka, Michele spent 6 months in India, Bangladesh, Burma, Thailand, Laos, Malaysia, and Indonesia. From 2006 to 2009, she worked at the Association of American Colleges and Universities, managing Core Commitments, which was a national initiative promoting students' development of personal and social responsibility through campus innovation. So you can see that Michele's been in the social entrepreneurship and social responsibility area for a long time. As a member of the Elon University Research Seminar on Teaching Democratic Thinking, which she did from 2009 to 2011, Michele created What Moves You, which is a travel curriculum for South and Southeast Asia that explores ethical questions related to global interdependence and develops empathy skills. Michele has worked for Siemens and other European corporations in Paris, France, and Munich, Germany, where she grew up. She holds a BA in Philosophy and Economics from Messiah College and an MA in Philosophy from the Institute for Christian Studies in Toronto, Canada. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Michele Leaman.
So, not to give it away, but I think the future of social innovation is all of you. So thank you for having me. This is really special for me. And my plan for today is to help you kind of hear from me about how I got into social entrepreneurship, what Ashoka is all about, what is this thing called social entrepreneurship, why is it exciting, and what's the future, what's the edge of social innovation, where is it going? So, see, and I already lost my clicker, and I haven't even gotten past the first slide. I don't know about you, but I know some people who started out probably when they were 4 years old, and they already knew what they were going to do with their life. They knew exactly. They had it all planned out, and it felt like the only thing left to do was to push the play button. My experience hasn't been anything like that. I am not that kind of person. I struggle, I don't really know what I want to do, I want this thing, then I want the other thing. And learning about social entrepreneurship made me realize that maybe that's not such a bad thing. There is an indie rock band that I really like. It's called Harper Blinn. And I think that the key lead singer is probably in love with the social entrepreneur because he has these really incredibly over-the-top love songs, and one of the lyrics is this: I move mountains, but you change the course of rivers. And the way I see that is, I think I'm a pretty big deal. I do lots of things, but somehow something about you, what you do, it might be more subtle, changes the course of things, changes everything that comes after that. And I think that that's a little bit what social entrepreneur is about, and I'll be talking more and kind of fill in the details around the edges. But really this system, getting at the systems change. You might have heard about this person, Sara Sarasvati. There's a lot of research done about why entrepreneurs are entrepreneurs, what makes them successful at their ventures, why are they able to launch businesses where others don't succeed. And they weren't making very much progress with that research until they really looked at how entrepreneurs think. And when they looked at how they think, they realized that entrepreneurs, what's interesting about entrepreneurs is that they operate in conditions of extreme uncertainty. And so where others can kind of use a traditional strategic planning process and you know, the past is probably pretty predictable compared to the future, entrepreneurs have no idea what's going to come next. They don't know if they have their value proposition right. They don't know if they're developing the right product. Everything is uncertain. So this researcher, Saraswati, she found out that actually what makes entrepreneurs unique isn't so much how they act, but how they think. And how they think is they think about who they know, who they are, who they know, and what to do next. So this who am I, this question, who am I, what do I know, and what am I going to do next? And I think this is really applicable to, if you think about where our life is headed, there's an increasing rate of change in the world. Things are not predictable anymore. You know, I'm sure you're tired of hearing it, but you know, there's this saying that says, by the 5 years, by the time you graduate, 5 years out, the jobs that you'll be taking hadn't even existed yet now. And so you definitely live in times of uncertainty. And so in a sense, you don't have a choice but to live an entrepreneurial life. You have to think about who am I, who do I know, what do I know, and what am I going to do next? You can plan, but there's no guarantees. And this can be a little bit scary when the future is so unscripted. But what Saraswati found out is that entrepreneurs actually don't find that a terrifying thought because they're thinking about shaping the future. So the future being uncertain is frustrating only if you don't think you can play a role in creating what the future will be. And so I want to encourage you to think about your life in a way that would say, what is the future that I want to create, and how can I get involved with that? And that is sort of a cycle of entrepreneurial thinking. Here is my first definition of social entrepreneurship, and it's really unorthodox, so maybe wait till the official one to write it down. But I like this one because for me it's about thinking way radically about what kind of world we could have that is radically different from the one we have now. And also thinking about change not in terms of increments, but completely transformative. So what I mean by that is, if you're thinking about the need in the world of feeding the hungry, the idea would be not just more food, but different and healthier food. Or for folks that need medicine, not just more medicine, but how can we change the systems that get medicine to those that need it a lot more efficiently and quickly? I'm going to tell you a little bit about my life now, just to give you a sense of how I got into social entrepreneurship. This is going to sound strange, but growing up, all my friends thought my parents were spies. I grew up in Germany, and they're not spies. My parents are not spies. They are Americans. They're evangelical Christian missionaries who've been in Germany for 40 years now. And maybe it was because my father used to go to Russia pretending to sell medical equipment, but actually bringing Bibles there, that there was kind of a shroud of secrecy within my family. So it was important. He didn't really want anyone to know what they were doing there or why. And you know, when kids ask you, or the parents of your friends when you're 5 years old, you know, what do your parents do? And you don't really have a coherent answer, that's fine, right? It's kind of normal for a 5-year-old. The older you get, it's a little bit weird. If think of me at 16, not really kind of avoiding the question of what my family does. And so by the time I was around 16, I was really bitter. I had been loyal to my family and kept that promise, and yet at the same time I felt like no one really knew me, that I was disconnected to the people around me. And I have this philosopher friend, and she writes a quote that has been really meaningful for me in my life. And I actually might have written it down here. So she says that what's really insidious about lies isn't so much that you're hurting another person. It's that actually you're hurting yourself. You are putting yourself into isolation where you don't connect with other people. Okay, and so how does this actually relate to social entrepreneurship? I would say that one of the most important things we can do in terms of building our life in a meaningful way and building our success, whatever that might look like for you, is a commitment to truth. If you think about it, if you are not actually facing reality, all the painful aspects of it, all the complicated parts, you are going to establish wrong assumptions that will lead to inaccurate strategy, and it will be unsuccessful. And so whether in sort of business ventures or life, that commitment to reality is really important. And I mention that especially here because I think there's no better place than college to really face those complicated intricacies of reality in all kinds of different fields. And really being able to face that is what's going to allow you to have an impact in the world. I probably doesn't surprise you at this point, but when I got to college, I had no idea what I wanted to major in. I started with chemistry, transferred to business, contemplated sports medicine for a while, and finally landed in philosophy. That was my home, and that was a really productive place for me to explore frameworks for thinking about life and what I wanted to do with my life. And right after graduation, I went straight into graduate school, and it gets even more bizarre from here. I did a master's in philosophy in post-structuralist, feminist, Lacanian psychoanalysis. So it's been a long and circuitous path to social entrepreneurship. But it was an incredible journey, and for me, I had developed so many theories about what I thought about life, what I thought about the world, how I felt like I could make a difference. And yet none of them had really been crash tested. None of them had really, I sat in a classroom, I thought about it, it made sense in my head, but did it actually make a difference? Did it matter? And so I'm definitely one for adventure. Worked a few temp jobs, saved $1,500, and went on a 5-month journey to India. No plan. And this is where it led me. Quite the mountaintop experience. It was on the way, this is 5 days on the way to this peak where I was chewing on hard-boiled frozen eggs for most of the time, quite miserable, but really a journey that I would never forget. And what was so important about travel to me is that you're open in a new way. You know, when you're at home, you just go through your day-to-day rut, and when you're traveling, you're curious. Everything is unscripted. It's the prime example of conditions of uncertainty. You don't know where you're going to sleep, you don't know where you're going to eat, you don't know how things are going to taste, you don't know what people are saying, you don't know how you're going to get from A to B. Everything is new and different. And what I think is so special about that is it puts you into a mindset where you really get to be intentional about how you live. You talk to strangers. And I think that the key really is, how can we, even when we're not traveling, even when we're in familiar places, treat life as if it was travel. Talk to strangers. Have that sense of curiosity. Treat things as if you didn't actually know what was going on. And I think that there's incredible potential there to find new value, new ways of innovating, new ways of doing things, and that kind of approach to life. So what then? I saw a lot of things on my journey, and actually a few years later, it was mentioned in my bio, I went back for a longer trip and a longer journey to learn even more about human flourishing and how I might be able to make a difference in the world. And I want to read you a story, and I hope that you'll treat it with me as a case study. So think along with me about what social entrepreneurs would do with this situation. How would you think about this situation to want to make a difference in the world? How could we, what difference could we make in this situation, and how? So the situation is, I'm in Bangladesh, and this is a story of an experience that I had, and we're traveling near Bandaban, which is in the Chittagong Hill Tracts, right on border to Burma, a very contested area. And we're there with a friend that we've made, a local who's showing us his village, Sanjoy, who speaks the language Bangla. I just learned to say, "How are you?" in Bangla, and I practice on a young Muslim woman dressed in black from head to toe. "Balo balo," she says energetically, smiling at me. I sit down next to her on a cement wall along the road. I ask for the name of the very young baby in her arms. "Aki," she says. From other gesturing, I gather that the baby is only 1 month old. She starts talking to Sanjoy, our guide, who translates that she has invited us for lunch at her house. At first, there's confusion and uncertainty. Her house is far away, 1 hour by foot, Sanjoy says, pointing up the mountain road. Do we want to do this? What are the expectations? But we have come so far, why not summon faith and courage and take the last few steps to meet this gesture of unexpected hospitality? Can you ask her name? I request of Sanjoy as we head up out the hill. Hasina, he says. Hasina and Sanjoy are chatting. Love marriage, Sanjoy says, describing Hasina's difficult position. She married at 13, running away with a 17-year-old, a Buddhist, though her family is Muslim. Hasina's husband works in a brick quarry. Sanjoy says that he is no good in a way that stops me from requesting further details. Because of this marriage, Hasina cannot return to her father's house. She and her husband have 4 children, 2 daughters and 2 sons. Later, I find out that Hasina is 28 years old. Younger than me, I keep thinking in disbelief. I study her face and try to see deeply into her eyes. I try to comprehend that we are peers and that in another world and another life, we may have been good friends. In the span of my lifetime, she has also lived hers. And yet her smile disguises a viscid encumbrance, while my age feels light and agile. After turning off the road, we travel on a tiny and treacherously steep footpath, down and up a hill, through a banana grove, and along a canopied stream bed. We arrive at our family's hut, no bigger than 10 by 12 feet, perched on a bamboo stilts, with ragged and hole-ridden thatched palm leaf siding. We climb up a stubby bamboo ladder and crawl inside. Inside, we meet Hasina's oldest daughter, 9-year-old Rosi. Rosi has been tending to 2 of her younger siblings at home. She is fittingly poor and unspeakably gorgeous. She has huge, deep green eyes and a heart-melting smile. Who would not want to honor beauty like this? I can feel my emotions becoming irrevocably entangled. Sensibly, I try to remind my heart, there are innumerable others equally poor and not as beautiful. But Rosie is charming, energetic, caring, unbelievably hardworking. Rosie gets water, Rosie washes dishes, Rosie sifts and depebbles the rice, washes the rice, lights the fire, stokes the fire, puts the rice on to cook, cuts vegetables, and changes her baby sister. Rosie then points out that we are both wearing hairpins, and I am relieved and thankful to the small girl for finding us some common ground. Surely, at least, all hairpins are created equal. We both take one out of our hair to show to each other. We gaze down at the 2 hairpins I am holding, and there, cupped in my hand, Michele, Rosie, and the whole world is reflected. Rosie's hairpin is straight, small, and rusty, and mine, well, mine is shiny silver, built sturdily with ripples so that more hair fits in, and it has rubber tips on the end so that it doesn't prick your scalp. Here, remarkably, we have found something that we both have, and yet even this seemingly innocent commonality only serves to showcase how everything in my life is the luxury version. I hand Rosie my hairpin to keep, and she carefully studies it, holding it as something precious. Lunch is delicious, and when this time comes, it is very, very hard to leave. My heart hurts, my throat is thick and lumpy, and my eyes are wet. There's nothing I now know with my mind that I didn't know 3 hours ago, but much has changed. This could be me. Here is my sister, here is my daughter, here is my best friend. Human beings as worthy, as complicated, as loving, as hopeful as anyone. I have so much to learn from them. and they could really use some help. Hasina leads us along a muddy, slippery path to get back to a small road, which after a number of miles will lead us back to the town of Bandarban, from which a multi-hour bus ride will deliver us back to Chittagong, then to another city, and eventually to an airport from which we will traverse continents. How did we get here? With every necessary step away, the worlds that separate us seem to multiply. Thank you for listening. And as you can tell, that was a really impactful story in my life. And I continually think of it as an example of what would help Hasina. And if you think about it, there are probably many things that you could think of, right? She's a really terrible form of shelter. She could use a different house. She could definitely use some more banana trees. Some added income for that would be really helpful. A different cooking stove, I'm sure that's not healthy. And how about some shoes? So there's so many different ways. And facing that sort of reality gave me a sense of overwhelm. Where do you even start? And it was kind of at this point in my life when I returned to the US that I found out about a guy. There's Rosie, forgot to show you that picture. But I found out about a guy that's called Bill Drayton, and he's actually the founder of Ashoka. And he has this quote that I came across. And so as I was thinking about Hasina and what would be helpful to her, not really expecting to meet her ever again, but just as a case study, this quote really made me think. How can we not just help people in the immediate sense, or even teach them how to fish to help themselves, but how can we change the system that brings about these equalities in the first place? And one thing you might want to know about Bill Drayton is he actually started out not too different from me in weird ways, and that he was driving overland in a VW bus in the late 60s to India. And he had heard about this guy called Vinoba Bhave, who was this person in India who was working on redistributing land. You might know about India that there is a caste system, and at that time especially, the casteless didn't have any right to own lands. And that has serious implications on your ability to have an economically viable life. And so he would go to big landowners and talk them into gifting their land to the casteless. And Bill Drayton, the founder of Ashoka, was fascinated by this. He was thinking ahead. He was thinking, if this guy is successful, this is going to mean huge change for India and for how people can survive and lead sustainably productive lives. And when he got to India, he found more people like that. And he started, we have at Ashoka these crazy archives of Bill's notes when he was back in India in the late 60s and 70s, taking notes about what makes some people really good at making change in the world, and not just doing good things or helping people out, but actually shifting the system. And so in 1980, he founded Ashoka. We now have 200 staff and offices, 25 offices, but actually Ashoka sort of reach within 70 countries. And out of this looking for the people who can make change, Bill started a fellowship, which we call the Ashoka Fellowship. And now there are almost 3,000 Ashoka Fellows worldwide in 70 countries. And so you can see, they're all over the place. And one interesting part here is, so maybe I'll pause here to say what we mean by social entrepreneurship. Here's the definition you can write down because it's sort of legitimate within Ashoka. And I want to quickly point out just a difference between social entrepreneurship and social enterprise. I'm not the definitive source on this. There's a lot of disagreement, but I'll tell you the difference that kind of has made sense to me and that I've found helpful. So based on what they say on their company website, I think Tom's Shoes is a fairly decent example of a social enterprise. For every pair of shoes that people buy, they donate another pair to children who don't have shoes to protect their feet, because a lot of medical injuries happen, and it's a lot of medical costs. And so they have earned revenue streams, they're for profit, but at the same time, their primary focus is for social impact. So that I think is a decent example of social enterprise. Social entrepreneurship, or maybe one more thing about social enterprise, is that there's no real end in mind, right? The more shoes they can sell, the more shoes they can donate, the more kids have shoes. So it's a sustainable model that can continue indefinitely. With social entrepreneurship, there is most often a target, a problem that you want to solve, and so you already have the end in mind. There's often earned revenue streams, there's often business models used, but you're planning to get out. You're planning to solve the problem and then get out of business, put yourself out of business, basically. So I think that that's kind of a quick and dirty way to sort of think about what's social enterprise and what's social entrepreneurship. And just maybe to also give an example of social entrepreneurship, I'll be talking about empathy in just a little bit. And one really impressive social entrepreneur is from Canada called Mary Gordon. She has an organization called Roots of Empathy. And what this does is she brings babies into elementary school classrooms. And what the elementary school kids do is they sit around a green blanket and they watch the baby. And they talk about what the baby is doing and what the baby must be thinking. And how the baby feels and how we can take care of the baby. So that may sound kind of soft to you and feel goodish, but she has really, really hard data on the implications that has on bullying in the classroom in the schools. Radically decreases bullying in the schools. And so I think another characteristic of social entrepreneurship is oftentimes that the solution that they come up with is really new and interesting and innovative and hasn't really been tried. People didn't think that bringing a baby into the classroom and talking about how the baby feels would so obviously reduce bullying. So many other programs that have been tried, sometimes successfully and sometimes not. So I think that that's another interesting angle on social entrepreneurship to keep in mind. You should probably be asking, so what is the impact that Ashoka is aiming for? Our goal is to elect the right fellows. And for us, those are fellows that are actually going to reach their vision and reach their goals. And because we elect leading social entrepreneurs in so many different sectors, we have some of these metrics where we're trying to look at whether they're achieving actual systems change. So whether they're still continuing to work on their vision, whether others are copying what these social entrepreneurs are doing, whether they've achieved policy change. So is it actually so widespread accepted that their solution is working that some of this is trickling into policy? And that they're considered leaders in their field. And so these are the numbers that we hope to continuously drive up, to refine how we select fellows and how we support them to be most successful at systems change. So here's how we select them. And this can be a really long, drawn-out process. If you speak to an Ashoka Fellow, they'll tell you that it's kind of gruesome, they didn't know what was going on, interview after interview after interview about their life story and what led them to launch a venture. But our first knockout test, is it a new idea? There's many great solutions in the world, but is this really an innovative new idea that we want to spread and showcase as sort of a model for others to follow? Is it creative? Is it entrepreneurial? Does it use business practices and mindset? And I think the most interesting one here is probably the ethical fiber. So Bill Drayton, our eccentric founder, he has the way he recommends, because you might imagine it's kind of difficult to assess someone's ethical fiber. Are you a good person? I don't know. But what he says is, when you're talking with someone, think about, and this is, I find this really funny actually, but I think it kind of works. Think about hanging off a cliff for dear life. And you look that other person in the eyes and you think about, would they help me out? Are they trustworthy? Are they the kind of person that would risk their lives to save mine? And funny enough, I don't think we think about this in this way enough, but we usually have a gut sense about people and whether they're going to be doing good in the world. So I think that's kind of an unusual criteria to consider and very subjective. So I think it's interesting that we've included it because I definitely think it's worked. And if you've met Ashoka Fellows, you probably have that sense too. So after 3,000 Ashoka Fellows in 30 years, we realized that that's not going to be enough. It's going to be obvious to you, but given the complex world problems that we're facing, 3,000 innovators is not going to be enough. So what Ashoka realized is that we want to work towards a world where everyone is a change maker. And what this means for us is not necessarily that everyone is going to be a professional social entrepreneur, but that everyone has the competence and confidence to drive change. So going back to what I was saying earlier, has the skills to lead an entrepreneurial life, feels confident that they don't need to react to the change that is happening in the world, but that they can help shape the future. So that's kind of where we see the future of social innovation, also going to each unique individual and developing the competence, the skills needed to drive change. So empathy, I've already indicated it in a number of different places, I think is going to be crucial as we're looking forward. You remember the Arab Spring, I'm sure, just a year ago. A lot of talk about how new technologies, social media, are allowing for more and more voices to be heard, allowing for more and more participation and from parts of the world and segments of society that hadn't really had a global voice before. And we're, of course, only at the beginning of this, but it's really interesting to think through. So now we have the tools for everyone to participate, but is everyone prepared? And that's kind of where the Ashoka vision comes in as well. How can we, now that we have the tools, where we're figuring out how more and more people can participate in shaping the world and don't just have to react to change that happens to them, how can we be prepared for that? How can everyone be a change maker? I'm just going to read this out loud. This is a quote from our president that kind of says what we're looking towards 10 years out. She says that the most important change must be the change to empower humans from passive recipients of solutions to initiators and champions of change. Instead of continuing to operate within the existing social political framework using the same incentives and elements that aren't producing results, we will change the system and support new frameworks that enable large numbers of citizens to participate in and drive social change. And when she says we there, she doesn't mean Ashoka in particular, but hopefully everyone. How can everyone participate in shaping change? If you think that this talk about empathy is a bit of a nice to have, but not necessary soft skill, I just want to tell you a quick story about the Turing Test. Who in this room knows what the Turing Test is, just by show of hands? Is there anyone? Excellent. A little bit. Okay, not too many, so I can still tell the story. I'm really completely obsessed with this. I find it fascinating. So it comes out of, Turing was named after a mathematician, this competition, and it's really big in the artificial intelligence community. And the hypothesis was that computers would be able to, we could say that computers can think once we can't distinguish between a human and a computer anymore. So how this works in this test, it's a competition, is you have these chat stalls set up where judges are sitting in front of computers and for 5-minute intervals they're chatting. They're chatting with someone or something. It's either a human or a computer and they don't know what it is. But their job as a judge is to decide, am I chatting with a human or am I chatting with a computer? And of course, computer programmers, mathematicians, the whole AI community works hard at developing programs that can chat like a human. And there's 2 awards that come out of this Turing test. One is the Most Human Computer Award. So that program that was most frequently confused for an actual human, even though it's a computer. The other award, more interesting to me, is the Most Human Human Award. So which human on the other end of the chat line was least frequently mistaked for a computer? And so one year, I'll introduce you to Christian. This is Christian here, at least the quote, not the picture. And he is a journalist for The Atlantic. And he decided, he had heard that the Turing Test one year, the bots had won. And this really upset him. He wanted to make sure that humans won. He thought, this can't be that hard. I can't believe this is happening. So he studied up for months. And he's trying to learn, how can he be more human in this context? And I think what's really incredible about that is that, you know, people give him this advice, as you see here on the screen, oh, don't worry, you're human, so just be yourself. But he realized that that isn't enough. Computers wouldn't have won if it was just enough to show up. There's more at it. So I want to read you just briefly, as he's in the thick of this competition, some of his reflections. 4 minutes and 43 seconds left. My fingers tapped and fluttered anxiously. I could just feel the clock grinding away while we lingered over pleasantries. I felt this desperate urge to go off script. Cut the crap, cut to the chase, because I knew that the computers could do the small talk thing, which played directly into their preparation. As the generic civilities stretched forebodingly out before me, I realized that this is the very kind of conversational boilerplate that was the enemy, every bit as much as the bots. How, I was thinking as I typed another unassuming pleasantry, do I get an obviously human connection to happen? So I know it's kind of a crazy story and an interesting perspective, but what that really makes me think about is how empathy and our ability to be human in that way and create really authentic human connections is going to be what sets us apart, in the next century, in the next 10 years. Try to be what computers can't be. Kind of seems obvious. During the Industrial Revolution, there was a lot of fear around machines replacing humans and taking their jobs. That sort of fear waned for a while or got transformed and seems a little quaint to us now. And I'm not saying that I think humans can be replaced for everything, but I think it is important that we live the kinds of human lives that are extraordinary, that are unique, that are empathetic, where we challenge ourselves to actually make human connections happen. And I think that that's what will lead to more social impact. So this is actually Christian's reflection after the Turing test. And he says, how do we connect meaningfully with each other, as meaningfully as possible within the limits of language and time? How does empathy work? What is the process by which someone enters into our life and comes to mean something to us? These, to me, are the test's most central questions, the most central question of being human. So I just want to mention briefly that Ashoka has an empathy initiative, and we have this big competition platform that sort of is looking right now, and you might have seen the cards out front that you're welcome to take, is searching for innovations in how to, especially children, how can children master empathy early on so that they have those skills that they'll need. And what I just want to mention too here is about how Ashoka develops programs. I think what's really fascinating and why we're really in a special position is that with these 3,000 Ashoka Fellows that we select, we get to look at the ideas that they're bringing, the solutions that they're working on, and we can work on trying to see patterns. So what are some of the patterns in innovation? And the empathy initiative arose from the sense that we kept seeing this reoccurring theme. More and more fellows working in different sectors with different stakeholders, different constituents, are working on how to develop empathy. There must be something to this. So we get to gather Ashoka Fellows and work on something that we call collaborative entrepreneurship, where we really try to synthesize all the knowledge and insights that these Ashoka Fellows working across all these different sectors are bringing to us about what works in developing empathy, because this is something that everyone needs, clearly. So this is the card that you can find out front. And then I think sort of more coming to the end, I think one more thing that I want to bring up here that I see being really important for social innovation in the next 10 years is this idea of collective impact. So I think if you look at social entrepreneurship, the way it's usually framed is there's a social problem. It's bad. You have a heroic individual social entrepreneur come along with his innovative mind or her innovative mind, come up with the solution to address the problem, and that's fantastic. And it is, and that's really amazing. But one thing that bothers me sometimes is that it's always going from a net negative to neutral. We're fixing something that's been really wrong. But I think that there is so much room for social innovation and social entrepreneurship going from neutral to positive, or from even very positive circumstances to even more incredible. And especially, I think, for really large, complex problems, we need to bring even more players in. So there's an article that's really worth looking at in Stanford's Social Innovation Review around collective impact this fall. And I just wanted to read one quote from it. So for really big problems, they write, large-scale social change requires broad cross-sector coordination because reaching an effective solution requires learning by stakeholders involved in the problem who must then change their own behavior in order to create a solution. So it's not so much the kind of familiar model that we work with social entrepreneurship where you have an idea, you implement it, you see if it works, and then you scale to as many places as possible. This is for the really, really, really big problems, let's say water crisis. There are so many different players involved. And what the part of the solution needs to look like is a change of behaviors of all those stakeholders and coordinating amongst each other. And so I think that there's a few places where this is already happening. And it's really exciting to me. So I'm curious to see is there anyone here that knows what this is? Excellent. Only one person. Okay. Up there too. So this isn't a crop circle. This is something called Burning Man. It is in the Nevada desert. And usually this isn't there. But for a week in August, every year, this city pops up. It's a city of 50,000 people. What's remarkable about this is, it's a pretty ordinary city in one sense. It has cafes, it has restaurants, it has bars, it has yoga studios, it has schools, it has libraries, it has coffee shops. What's not so ordinary about it is, and this is a temple, in fact, and actually this temple, just to give you a sense of the scale, is right there. So this is a really huge place that's built within a matter of weeks. So we have a temple, we have some interesting artwork here. This is a restaurant, there's an art car driving by that looks pretty crazy, a movie theater, another crazy art car, a lot about art. What's amazing about this is that it's not like Disneyland. It's not that you have a corporation behind it and someone, you have a whole team of designers and artists and all this that put this on. This is 100% participant driven. So this means that people save up, there are some art grants, but people save up the entire year to create something that they can bring here and share with everyone. And get this is the really radical part. There is no form of money exchange at Burning Man. So that means that you can't buy anything. You bring everything that you need and you share everything, if you want to. And I know there's sometimes there's confusion around this. This is not a barter economy. So this is actually a gifting economy. So you walk into a coffee shop, you get your latte, and you leave, and there's no need to pay. And so this is really a remarkable situation that's happening. Just to give you a little bit more sense of the scale of this, here's another art project, a crazy fire-throwing art project. And why I bring this up is that I think this is touching on something that we need way more of. And I mentioned it in the beginning. With Ashoka, I work with Ashoka U, which is Ashoka's college and university program. So I think a lot about how can universities be more amazing. I'm actually a huge fan of universities already. I think that they do amazing things. But how can they contribute even more to solving the world's problems? And they're kind of unique in the sense of just as, and this comparison might seem a little bit crazy to you, but just as Burning Man brings together all these disparate groups to within a week create this incredible city, fully functioning and supportive of all kinds of different activities. Universities, similar, bring together groups of people with all kinds of different disciplines, experience, expertise, to produce knowledge and student learning. So it's not that different as you might think. And I think that collaborating in this kind of way across different expertise, across different fields of study could really produce something amazing. And so just to give you kind of where we're headed with Ashoka U, give you more of an idea of what this would look like. So I think just to put the higher education sector in perspective, it has an impressive track record. I don't think there's been anything more reliable to guarantee, not guarantee, but a pretty good indicator of future economic prosperity. It does incredible work in terms of producing new insights, scientific discoveries. But also it's in crisis, right? It's a system that was built hundreds of years ago, way more than that actually, and the world has changed. And so the kind of skills that students need to learn, the kind of knowledge that we need, it's not always best equipped to develop the kinds of students and graduates that we need, both from the employer side, but just generally for solving social problems as well. And so it's kind of in crisis. There's a lot of questions around it. There's a lot of questions around whether universities will exist in the form that we know them at all in the next 20, 50, 100 years, or whether we're all going to go online. But I think that discussion misses a really important point that I was hoping to sort of point to with the Burning Man example. And that is that you can get skills online, right? You can learn HTML, you can learn all kinds of things, you can take a history class, this is great. But I think, more importantly, the why we come together at universities is because it transforms lives. It changes the way we think about life and what we want to do with our life. And there's an incredible amount of resources that you have available to you to learn, to figure out what's going on in the world. And there's an opportunity to participate and create new things. And that's sort of, I think, the cutting edge of where universities could grow to, and even more. So we need higher education, definitely. And I think we will continue to, just in new and more collaborative, more open, more creative ways. And so we kind of think about, if you think that we built our entire highway system at a time in this country when things were kind of tough, because we invested in that and we knew it would pay off in the future. And similarly, times are a little bit tough now, but I think now is the time to invest in the university, in a university that's more entrepreneurial, more innovative, and produces the kinds of graduates and change makers that the world needs. And so Ashoka U has 3 goals. To reach, to have a sector of universities that are entrepreneurial and innovative. Our 3 goals is, and how our plan is to get there, is that we would empower leaders to transform higher education and give them a community of peers to support them. So we have a program called Changemaker Campus, and at the Changemaker campuses, there are leaders who are specifically working to transform their university. And we bring those folks together and help them learn from each other and help them grow. And what we also want to do with Ashoka U is celebrate and showcase the institutions that take more risks and really demonstrate results to cultivate a more entrepreneurial and innovative institution. And here this picture is from Arizona State University. They sort of had this train car that they plastered announcing that they're a Changemaker campus. And the way they're doing it at Arizona State University is to really say, so we have the traditional structure of universities is around schools. You have your School of Business, you have your School of Medicine, you have this, that, and the other thing, and they're fairly separated. And at Arizona State University, they've restructured that around global problems. So you have a school looking at different medical needs. You have a school looking at human development. And so it's more structured around what are the challenges in the region and globally And how can you bring different faculty with expertise in those areas together to look at those issues? And it's a work in progress, but I think it's a really interesting development. And we have one partner who he says, to kind of give you a sense of what this vision is about, you know, the ubiquitous question for college students, I'm sure you ask it to each other all the time, is what's your major, right? And to be honest, it doesn't really matter very often after you graduate. Neither does your GPA. But our partner says, so I think we'll reach our mission with Ashoka U when we stop asking the question, what's your major, and we start asking the question, what's your problem? So when students around the world are asking, what's your problem, what they mean is, what is the social problem in the world that you're working on, that you're studying to figure out how to make a difference? And finally, and I think this is also what I was talking about with the collective impact and kind of a model that Burning Man is piloting, is that we want to, with Ashoka U, we want to catalyze higher education to really be a leading industry with cross-sector collaboration. And really to say, how can universities look at challenges regionally or globally and move the needle? How can they actually make a difference on some of these issues? The resources are there. Because for these big problems, it's exactly the kind of situation we need. We need experts from all different areas working together. So really the question, I think, for Ashoka U is, and I'd love to open up conversation about that or anything else that sparked your interest, is around how will you transform the university experience to be a world-changing experience? How can being in college, not that you're waiting for the real world, but be about changing the world? And so, yeah, I think I'll leave it at that. And thank you so much for your attention. And I'd love to take questions.
Do we have some questions? So I'll get us started here. So Michele, you met with some students last night, and one of the questions that they asked was, and so we'll start the kind of controversy, why isn't Notre Dame a change maker campus? What are you looking for from students, faculty, administration staff of universities across the country or across the world? What are you looking for when you decide to partner with a campus or a university?
Thank you. So for a Changemaker campus, we're looking for university partners that are really committed to the vision, first and foremost, of how can universities play a new role in driving global social change, and kind of experimenting with us. But what we look at there is what we've learned over the past few years in our Changemaker campus partnerships is that certain conditions have to be in place at the university for the partnership to work out and to really make progress. And one thing is that there would be, I mentioned the change leader, someone on campus, could be faculty, could be administration, could be staff, who really sees it as their professional calling to drive institutional change, to reach this vision. And secondly, that there would kind of behind that person or supporting that person be somewhat of a team from different faculty in different schools. Because what we've encountered a lot is there might be an institution that has an amazing social entrepreneurship program, but it's all only in the business school. And that, while that's really fantastic, what we're looking for is how can this affect, to solve these big global problems, we need expertise from more areas. So how can social entrepreneurship and social innovation be relevant to different disciplines? And then thirdly, I think we look for administrative support. So is this really a priority for the institution? And does the institution on the president level or the provost level really see social entrepreneurship and social innovation as a way to bolster the institution's value proposition, as a way for the institution to make a difference in the world. And that's, maybe not for everyone, but, that's sort of some of the requirements. And then from students, we really look for, is there student demand? Are students actually interested in this? We don't want to partner if it's just something that's sort of driven from top down, but there's no real student interest. So that's another thing we look for. Thank you.
Okay, so a question, I guess, regarding the aspect of empathy, I guess, in terms of with the advancement of technology and sometimes people saying that communications is more through the computer and sometimes without that face-to-face interaction, it could change the way we interact or even empathize with each other. Do you see that as like a threat to, I guess, having that empathetic aspect when trying to impact social change?
Yeah, I think that's really complicated, and I don't know exactly how it's going to pan out. I think definitely, research around intergroup dialogues on college campuses, there's definitely enough research that shows that just exposure to differing opinions isn't enough. In fact, sometimes it doesn't cultivate empathy, it cultivates the opposite. And so we have to learn more nuanced ways to actually cultivate real productive empathy. I know that sometimes I told you a little bit about my background, and sometimes, and now I'm in DC, very progressive liberal environment, and sometimes when I'm on Facebook, I feel schizophrenic because I have one post from a very conservative uncle of mine who is, saying things that I wouldn't want to repeat here. And then on the other end, very progressive, liberal students of mine that also express opinions that I don't. And then from all my travels, these friends that I've gathered in Bangladesh and Morocco and Thailand, expressing such a variety of opinions. So I think, I'm not sure if I'm fully addressing your question, but I think that exposure is not sufficient to develop empathy, and we need more tools to figure out how we can actually even hear each other. Right over here.
So in terms of cross-sector collaboration at universities, have you seen any best practices that seem to work? Thank you. Because I would guess, at least from my experience, that there's not a ton of cross-sector collaboration, at least from my experience at this university. I'm curious, have you seen in other universities models that have helped foster that sort of thing?
Yeah, so in one sense, there's tons going on. There's been decades of work in the service learning and civic engagement movement that have tried to figure out and develop models for building community partnerships, and with huge success. And it's been a continuous struggle to keep that effort going and to keep pushing that agenda. In terms of even more large-scale collaboration, one really innovative thing I've heard of is called Strive, and it's from Northern Kentucky University, and there also actually is an article. The article that I mentioned this in the Stanford Social Innovation Review also talks about this, where within the northern sort of Kentucky, Cincinnati environment, 9 college presidents came together, dozens of community partners, developed a shared vision and goal because they were worried about graduation rates, and implemented this agenda where they actually made a change of 10% over 5 years or something. And that's really impressive. So I think that's something that I find really inspiring, really getting down to specifics and saying, this is what we as a community, here's where we see the problem, this is what we want to achieve, and here's how we're going to work together to make that happen. And one of the success factors that they mentioned is really being specific about the measurable outcomes that they're seeking and having everyone commit to those. As well as sort of a backbone organization supporting that. I think the university could play that role in many instances, and meetings and sort of gatherings to continue to drive that forward. Yeah.
Hello, yes, next week The talk is going to be from the Mayor of South Bend. I don't know if you picked that up. And this year is an election year for America. And moving forward, what role can government play in social entrepreneurship? Are there any best practices from other countries that the Americans could look at, perhaps?
Yeah. I'm afraid that's not something I know a whole lot about, specifically because Ashoka has a stance for various historical reasons I won't go into, but to not take any government funding. So there's been very little interaction with government from Ashoka. But it has been interesting that this administration has established, the Office for Social Innovation in the White House, and I think the way they communicate their vision, at least to the degree that I'm familiar with, is to say we're not trying to implement a program. We, similar to an Ashoka model, I would almost say, is to sort of, we're interested in seeing where innovation is happening and how government can play a role to spread that. And I just realized that one thing that I almost completely forgot to mention, in Ireland right now, this is something that Ashoka is heavily involved in, is something called Change Nation. It's going on right now. And what that is Ashoka has this program called Globalizer, where from the pool of Ashoka Fellows, leading social entrepreneurs, we will pinpoint and see what are some of the most successful Ashoka Fellows that are really ready to scale globally, whose model could work in lots of different places. And this Change Nation program in Ireland is actually the opposite. It's like a localizer. So they've selected, done an analysis of the Irish economy, the social scape in Ireland, and taken 50 innovations. A lot of them are Ashoka Fellows, but Mohammed Yunus is one of them, brought them to Ireland to see what of these social innovations could take hold and work in Ireland. So I think that, and this was invited by the Prime Minister of Ireland, to bring this together, to have this gathering and to see how what social innovations could take in Ireland. So that, I think, is a really important role that government could play. Not so much, maybe I'm a little skeptical in thinking that government could be very involved in social innovations themselves, but certainly in identifying social innovations, promising innovations, and helping them grow and scale.
In Ireland, it's facing real uncertainty, and it's difficult for people in Ireland to understand that.
Yeah.
Social changes.
Thank you.
Okay, good. Hi, thank you very much for speaking, first of all. I was just wondering what the typical age and demographics for an Ashoka Fellow are, and if you could possibly talk a little bit more in depth about a project that has recently sparked your interest.
Can you say that last part again? I actually didn't catch that last part.
If you could please briefly talk about a project that has recently sparked your interest.
Oh yeah, definitely. So I don't have the full numbers in my head in terms of demographics. I know that it's getting younger. So we're electing younger and younger Ashoka Fellows. And I think in part that's also because of some of the prominence that social entrepreneurship is gaining. People are familiar with it. Some people have gotten schooling and taken classes in social entrepreneurship. So I think that is having an effect. In terms of otherwise demographic in the US, I'll just speak about the US for now, very much still concentrated on the coasts, not enough in the Midwest, hardly anything in the South, and that's something that we're really kind of troubled with. Also, not incredibly diverse. Decently in terms of race and ethnicity. And if you look at educational status, this is something that's troubling to me in particular, almost entirely from very prestigious institutions. So I'm also very concerned about how can we democratize social entrepreneurship so that it's really an opportunity that more people can take advantage of. At the moment, if you don't have a spouse or outside financial support or money, it's very hard to make it happen. And then let me think for a second of a model that's caught my interest. This isn't This isn't a completely new fellow. I think they were elected maybe 5 years ago or so. But someone named Mark Hannes, and you might be familiar with the Genocide Intervention Network. They've recently merged with Save Darfur. And one thing that I find interesting about his story is that he started in college, which I'm always interested in the social entrepreneurs that get started in college, and hopefully complete college, but some drop out. And what's interesting about his story is that he, to prevent, to get mobilized government to do something about genocide that's happening, he created report cards for Congress people that was visible on the internet to say this is how they're voting, they're not helping out to prevent genocide, and really making it visible so that activists and just general citizens that had concerns about this could take action more easily. And he tells his story, and it's just fascinating. One real turning point for him to realize that this was taking on is actually calls that he received from Congress people saying, what do I have to do to improve my grades? And coming out of college for someone, that's amazing. They're struggling to get the good grades, and now you have Congress people calling you about how they can get better grades. So.
Any more questions? Okay. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you. You've gone to Burning Man?
Thank you very much.
Oh, so sweet.